welcome. It is 6:30 on Monday, June 12th, 2023. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Burnsville Planning Commission. Tonight's Planning Commission meeting is being held both in person and virtually on Zoom. As chair, I'll be leading the Planning Commission, and the public is welcome to participate when requested throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting either in person or by Zoom. Additional instructions on how to participate are all online on the burnsvillemn.gov website under the public meeting calendar. As usual, tonight's meeting is also available for viewing on BCTV and on the city's website. If you're unable to participate this evening, maybe you're watching a rerun, that's fine. You can still send information, your comments to City Hall via email to our city staff, or you can just send it directly by snail mail to the City Hall. You may participate online tonight by going to zoom.us/join and typing in meeting ID 827-6687-7978. Didn't write that down. It's okay. It's all on the website. Once you've logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you expect to speak to. If attendees experience audio problems, feel free to just back out and come back in. That usually fixes the issue. You can also call in. Maybe you don't have a computer, that's fine. You can call in at 651-372-8299, meeting ID 827-6687-7978 for each hearing. I will open up a time when people can speak to that item, and I'll give more instructions then. You'll be muted until that time, and also realize there could be a delay between your phone and the computer behind you, so we ask you to turn it down if you're calling by phone. And with that, again, all these instructions are online at burnsvillemn.gov on the public meeting calendar. We have a couple of continuance meetings. This is going to be a fun meeting tonight. A couple of things we're going to finally close. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at the agenda. Any changes to the agenda, commissioners? Seeing none, I look for a motion. Commissioner Timmerman.
Move to approve.
A motion made. Commissioner Wallace.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Wallace. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. Second item, we had a meeting back in May 22nd, 2023. The minutes were included in your packet. Any changes to those minutes, commissioners? Any changes, staff?
No changes.
None, seeing none, I look for a motion. Commissioner Wad.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Motion by Commissioner Wad, second by Commissioner Anderson.
I second that.
Oh, great. With that, I will call for a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Chair, I abstain. I was not here.
Okay, 3-1. 3-0-1, that's kind of a tie. That moves us to number 3 on the agenda. We're continuing a public hearing in the application for SVAP 2, Burnsville Market LLC, for a concept and development stage plan unit development to redevelop and construct a new grocery supermarket and potential for 6 separate commercial buildings. Preliminary and final plat of the Burn Hill 3rd Edition and subdivision ordinance variance for easements at 1750 County Road 42 West. Here to present is Kevin Shea. Mr. Shea, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Thanks for having me here tonight. So the first item you have before you tonight is an application by SVAP 2 Burnsville Market LLC for the concept and development stage plan unit development, which is to construct a new grocery store and potential for 6 commercial buildings, along with a preliminary and final plat for the Burn Hill 3rd Edition, along with a variance for easements along the entire 1750 County Road 42 West property. The property is bounded by 3 county roads, so County Road 42 on the south, County Road 5 on the west, and then McAndrews, which is County Road 38 on the north, and then Irving Avenue on the east. It is mixed use, with the southwest and east also being the mixed use classification, and the north being the R3A medium density residential classification. The site is an existing Cub Foods today. We're all probably pretty familiar with it, says it's on some major thoroughfares through Burnsville. And it has one existing, as part of this block, there is the Holiday gas station store that is in the southeast corner that would complete this block. There are various buildings shown on this site plan. We'll start on the west half. The west half is the grocery and liquor for what will or is proposed to be the new Cub Foods store. So this is the grocery and liquor, and then it has the associated parking on that western half. You'll notice that accesses are on both the north and the south sides as you split the site down the middle. So there is an access out to 42 and to County Road 38. Then if you move to the east side of the site, on the northeast corner, there's Retail Building E. This is the large retail site coming in at about 45,000 square feet on that northeast corner. And just for reference, all these retail pads that I'm gonna go through, besides the Cub Foods, there has not been an identified tenant of any of these spaces, so at this point, they're just retail spaces. So then we move into the two smaller spaces that are being proposed at this time, which is Retail Building D and F. Those are on either sides of the parking lot on the east side of the site. Those are smaller pads coming in a little below and a little above 5,000 square feet. And then there are some conceptual pads shown, which are the A, B, and C, which are on the south side of the site on 42. Those are, B and C are a little smaller, they're just about 4,200 square feet each, and then Retail A is about 2,700 square feet. Those are the kind of the buildings that make up the site plan as they have shown and proposed. There is an access as well out to Irving Avenue on the east side. That is now lining up with the access for the adjacent commercial to the east. So those two accesses will now line up for spacing, make sure traffic, conflicts like that are resolved. So that is the site. You'll notice various parking areas, large parking area for the Cub Food site, smaller parking areas for the Retail E, D, and F, but there are cross-access easements to share all this parking between all the uses. As I'll note, is one of the PUD deviations is a lessened parking. You'll note there's no stormwater ponding areas shown on here, as that's all underground infiltration. So that's all beneath various parking areas. So to zoom in, you'll see Retail A focused on first. That was the one on the south side, next to the access out to County Road 42. This one at this point is just concept stage PUD, so they are requesting a variety based on the retail buildings that they're proposing to build at this time. So Retail A, B, and C I'll go through first, and those are just concept stage PUD at this point. They're not asking for development stage PUD, so this is just conceptual at this point. These are marketed to the retail, restaurant, or service tenants. They are conceptually proposed to have some type of fast turnover use, like a drive-through use or something similar to that nature, given to the access and proximity to County Road 42. The other two being Retail B and C, you'll notice they're the slightly larger pad sites, so they're 4,200 square feet, or 4,250 and 4,355 for square feet. Same marketing, marketed to retail, restaurant, and service, as they also have that proximity, that access out to County Road 42. But all three of those retail sites are being conceptually planned at this stage only, no development stage PUD at this point. The pads that are for concept and development stage PUD, the first one would be the grocery, liquor, supermarket, which includes a pharmacy and drive-through. The drive-through is located on the south side of the building, so that'll be facing County Road 42. This building is 87,700 square feet, and it's proposed for the new Cub Foods store, and which you'll see when we get to the elevations, what they're proposing to do with that. And you may be familiar if you've seen others in the metro area. It's going to look very similar. Retail D, E, and F. D and F are the two smaller, as I mentioned. Retail E is the much larger retail site. These will all kind of internally access out onto Irving Avenue is the plan, but they do have access out to those north-south connections out to County Road 38 and County Road 42. You'll note, and this is included in here, that Retail D and F do have outdoor patio space planned for them. So they don't have tenants identified, but there is outdoor patio space identified for those sites. Whether they utilize it for which use, we don't have that yet identified. That'll come in with further details, but there is a patio space identified. Preliminary plat. So they are proposing at this point to divide the existing site up into 4 lots. On the preliminary plat, it's a little hard to see with all the line work for everything. One lot is for the Cub Food site. Lot 2 is for Retail E, which is the large site plus the parking lot. And then lot 3 is for Retail D, F, B, and C. And then lot 4 is for Retail Site A. So I'm going to flip to the next one. The final plat is a little easier to see just exactly where the lots are. This is all just based on how they wanted to break out the lots for each of those retail sites. One of the variants, or the variance, is associated with the fact that they're getting a variance from the subdivision ordinance, which is why it's not included in the PUD flexibilities, because it's from a different section of the city code, not from the zoning ordinance, but from the subdivision ordinance, and that's to not have drainage and utility easements on the internal lot lines, being the lot lines that are shared between the, not the extent that the outer extents by county road, the county road 38, 5, and 42 in Irving, but the interior lot lines that are shared between lots 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you'll see here, those are basically all the center area lot lines that share between, that way we don't have to establish setbacks from, or sorry, that way we don't have to establish drainage and utilities and over all those areas if the utilities were to shift within the internal of the site. PUD benefits, so they are proposing a substantial amount of landscaping, trees, and shrubs above the proposed ordinance standards. There are some areas where they do have to modify where those trees and shrubs are located, but they are showing a substantial amount over what's required. There is an increase of leasable commercial square footage from about 137,400 square feet to 155,000 square feet. That does increase in sales tax and property tax associated with the increased variety of commercial uses and retail spaces for the site. It will increase, and these are all approximate at this point, but jobs from the 90 current jobs at Cub Foods to an estimated 250 for the various new tenants throughout the overall mix of commercial development, and that'll obviously change depending on which tenants actually take over each retail space. Redevelopment of a dated and underperforming commercial anchor. So this is on a major corridor, multiple major corridors for Burnsville, and it's in rough shape. So this is a redevelopment that would bring this up to a new and improved area for Burnsville. Road improvements to McAndrews Road, which I'll go on to show through later, including a sidewalk connection that would close a current gap between the existing sidewalk connections that are present today along that south side of McAndrews, which is the north side of this site. It will also realign the driveway access, as I mentioned, from Irving Avenue to match the existing driveway to the Burnsville Shopping Center to the east. That way the traffic conflicts are minimized there. And then the proposed stormwater management will comply with the current standards of the city, which is the current site does not comply with current stormwater management standards. Some of the PUD deviations, total of 698 parking stalls where the code requires a minimum of 795 to be provided. Staff does support this deviation as it is internally sufficient, and the applicant did provide a memo to demonstrate the parking need for the various uses across the site as a whole. There are reduced setbacks for the multi-tenant retail buildings, 100 feet required from residential. So the site to the north is a medium density residential area. There's a 30-foot, so that would have a 100-foot setback. There's a 34-foot setback proposed for the northwest corner of the liquor grocery store site. That northwest corner of the Cub Food site is 34 feet setback instead of 100. To that north lot line, and then 60-foot required setback for retail building F, which is the building on the east side from the east property line versus the 38-foot proposed setback. So it's a deviation from 100 to 34 on that north side, and then 60 to 38 on the east side. Staff does support this deviation as well. Reduced building perimeter landscaping required. They're proposing 26% where 30% is the minimum required. Staff does not support this deviation. And these are all conditions that are included in the recommendation that we have, but I'm just going to run through so you can identify which ones staff does support and doesn't support. Reduced green space of 20% where minimum is 25%, so staff does not support this deviation. Pedestrian crosswalks distinguished with painted markings, stamped asphalt, and or concrete pavers where crosswalks are within the development are required to be distinguished with a different pavement material. Staff does not support this deviation. Increased impervious surface coverage on lots 1 and 2 of up to 81.5% where 75 is the maximum. Staff does not support this deviation. And you'll note a lot of these are due to the ratios of landscaping versus pavement. So that kind of is a large majority of these. Parking rows without landscape islands near the entrance of the grocery store and retail building E requires landscape islands at the beginning and end of each parking row with lots from more than 25 spaces. Staff doesn't support the deviation to not provide those parking islands at the end of the parking rows. Or I should say landscape islands at the end of the parking rows. And then screening ground-mounted mechanical equipment with coniferous shrubs where screening of ground-mounted is required by enclosure of durable or permanent materials. Staff does support this deviation to allow coniferous shrubs to screen that ground-mounted mechanical equipment. And then rooftop mechanical equipment within the required setback of 1.5 times the building height from any primary facade fronting a public street. Staff supports if this is screened fully from view of public streets and adjacent properties. So if they can demonstrate that the rooftop mechanical equipment can't be seen from the adjacent public streets, then staff does support this deviation. As far as the development summary chart, this is kind of just covering some of those areas where there's some of the deviations related to impervious surface. You'll notice the 75 to 81.5%, the green space required from 20 to 25, 20 being the proposed, 25 being the required. The building perimeter landscape required being 30%, and they're proposing 26%. The parking requirement of 795 stalls versus the 698 proposed. Those are some of the stats for the development as a whole. I mentioned some of the site constraints being the county road, so there has been a lot of conversation with the Dakota County Plat Commission regarding access in and out of the site. So those are some of the existing site constraints the applicant did have to work with, being that they're on 3 county roads and 1 major local roadway, with a 50-foot wide natural gas pipeline on the west and south. I mentioned the McAndrews public improvements. So they are improving the sidewalk connection, which is in the light pink color. This is the gap in the sidewalk existing today, so this will complete that connection. And then a concrete median that gets rebuilt, and along with some other slight improvements for adding a right turn lane in on McAndrews. So a right as you're going eastbound into the site. Another piece is to maintain access between the properties. So right now there's the Holiday Station store that has access into this area, and with this development, the applicant was proposing to not have access between the 2 sites. Staff is recommending that access be maintained to reduce conflicts from going out onto the county road and going back into Holiday if they needed to access between the 2 sites. So to maintain access there between those 2 sites, along with extending the sidewalk, so pedestrian access and vehicular access. Because this was a continuance, the neighborhood meeting was held back on May 1st, 2023. Over 360 invitation letters were mailed, and there were 5 attendees supporting redevelopment of the site, liking the various improvements that would be made, such as sidewalks, internal pedestrian ways, bike parking, outdoor seating areas. These are all improvements over the existing site as it is today. Getting into the building elevations. So this is the Cub Foods store site for the grocery, liquor, and pharmacy store. You'll probably be familiar if you've driven through some other communities where they've done a similar look to it. But they've got the various facade changes on the building. I won't go through all the mix of materials they have, but they do fluctuate between, bumping out areas that are greater than 100 feet and facade length to add some fluctuations in recessing the building or bringing it forward, using a variety of materials, having a lot of glass and open views, things like that. And this building does meet the architecture design guidelines. They did submit the architectural review tool to establish that as well. And this building is just over 25 feet tall. Retail D elevations. So these are, don't have a tenant identified, so they're very generic, and would then be modified based on the tenant that would propose to be in the site. They do show signage on 3 different areas, so it is possible to have up to 3 different tenants in this area, although one could potentially lease the entire space. That's something they'd have to come back in with the final PUD. These buildings are slightly shorter than the Cub Foods at about 19.5 feet tall. And they are using a similar architecture as that Cub Foods. They do match in terms of the materials and the styles that they're using. So these will look similar to the Cub Foods and kind of bring a cohesiveness to the buildings as a whole. And as shown so far, the signage does comply, but with a final PUD, we would require a comprehensive sign plan to show the detail of what the signage would look like. And then Retail F has 2 tenant signage spaces shown. Very similar to Retail D and the Cub Foods, same building style, same building materials, the variations, and the same building height as Retail D. And then retail E looks a little different. I mean, they use some similar architecture styles in terms of the stone and the paneling colors to kind of bring a style, but then having obviously the large blue area on the building is a color choice that differs from the others. Without knowing who the tenant is, they've proposed this as the building elevation. This, however, doesn't meet the building requirements or the architecture requirements for 100-foot long facades, a couple of various other things that are noted in the staff report to essentially comply with those based on the style of materials, the proportions of materials, and then also breaking up the building facade by bringing either parts of it forward or recessing it so we don't have more of a continuous building facade. This is the rooftop equipment screening for the Cub Foods site. So they do show various elevations from each angle showing how the building will look in a 3D perspective. The rooftop screening being the most, would go from the southwest corner the northwest corner would be the bottom elevation on here, showing how that would be screened from the public view. The landscape plan, so we'll start on the west half of the site. This is the landscape plan for the Cub Foods, liquor and pharmacy. You'll note there's significant landscaping around the perimeter of the site, some around the building elevation and quite a bit in the landscape islands they have proposed. They do have some modifications to meet based on current staff recommending conditions to increase the building perimeter landscaping, increase the parking lot landscape islands, and bring that overall landscaping forward on some of those crucial areas. But as proposed, they do exceed the number of landscape plantings overall. Same thing with the eastern half of the site. It's very similar landscaping plan, putting in the parking lot islands for landscaping, but then adding a few of those in there as well, and then focusing a little bit more on the building perimeter. So there's the site as a whole. They do have landscape centered on the north-south connection from County Road 38 McAndrews to County Road 42, as this is a corridor, and with a mixed-use development type like this, we would anticipate that they have a pedestrian corridor that enhances that pedestrian space, that pedestrian environment. So you'll note too on retail D, there is more of a patio enhanced landscape space on the north side of retail space D to kind of bring up that pedestrian environment. So to give some of those spaces a little enhancement as part of this mixed area. They do have a sign, I'll just show it. The pylon sign is on the south side of the site, adjacent to the access to County Road 42. And they are proposing a joint pylon sign that would have the tenants, the various tenants, so Cub Foods and then retail building D, E, F, A, B, and C, all on one pylon sign. So they are proposing this pylon sign as part of the PUD, and then some individual signage is shown conceptually for the retail sites A, B, and C, but at this point they don't have specific signage shown for those or what that would be. The grading plan. So this is the grading for the site. This is how, making all the stormwater work, the underground infiltration, things like that. I would let the engineers comment more on the grading to make sure it's compliant, but this is the grading as it stands today. Utility plan, they are proposing internal utilities for the most part for the site. You'll notice some of the connections north-south through that north-south connection from County Road 38 to 42 as well. Storm sewer, as I mentioned, this will have underground infiltration with storm sewer systems running throughout, and it does currently meet the stormwater standards for today. And the applicant will have to work with the engineering staff to comply with any conditions related to bringing that up to meet the standards. With that, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the application for SVAP2 Burnsville Market LLC for concept stage PUD, which is for retail sites A, B, and C, development and concept stage PUD, which is for retail sites D, E, and F, and the Cub Foods site, preliminary and final plat, and then a variance to allow for the creation of 4 lots without the drainage and utility easements for the internal lot lines, and the redevelopment of the Cub Foods grocery store building and development of 6 commercial retail buildings subject to the following conditions. And I won't run through all of them since they were in the packet, but there are 29 conditions recommended by staff with various memos included in those conditions.
Well, it'd be nice and not make you go through those. Thank you, Mr. Shea. I really appreciate the presentation. It was a very full one, which is very good. Before we go to questions and things of that nature, I do want to have, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what struck me was when reading through this, how many items that staff was not supportive of. And so I'd like to sort of look at that a little bit, if you don't mind. I think there were 4, maybe 5 of them we
Yeah.
did not support. And do you mind if we kind of walk through them and say, okay, this is why staff doesn't support this?
Yeah,
I think that will help give
Wanna
us an
go-
understanding.
back to that area, there we go, yep.
So, we'll reduce green space 20%, and we have a minimum green space in our ordinance because,
Essentially we don't want the, urban heat islands, things like that. We have a maximum impervious surface percentage for a reason, and that's the 75%. The associated flip side is the 25% green space. So those two are kind of linked together, the request for more impervious and the request for less green space. Staff, because of the site and it being a redevelopment at this point, we'd expect it to come into compliance with those, much like most other developments have, and because they're linked to then having those parking lot landscaped islands, you get a little more green space there, those percentages come more into compliance, things like that. And because they're requesting to have less parking stalls, we'd anticipate that those areas would be met as well. So staff just felt at this point that those were crucial pieces that could be brought into compliance and didn't need to be PUD deviations at this point.
when the original Cub Foods was put in 1979, I believe it was, somewhere in the late 70s, these weren't in existence at that time. So if we went to the parking lot at that point, we wouldn't see trees or,
I don't believe so, but I couldn't speak to when those specific ordinances were actually codified versus when this was developed.
So I guess what I'm saying is with the redevelopment, that's why we want to ensure that it's there, urban heat, et cetera. Right, okay.
Correct.
Thank you. And then the other item was the crosswalks. And I know we like to have the different pavement material. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
For that one specifically, it's just having the different pavement material is just a standard condition we've had, and so keeping that cohesive throughout, as there's not a big difference between cost-wise of having the different material versus, just having it with painted markings, and we feel that to keep it cohesive with the rest of the area and keep it cohesive with Burnsville, that we should have that standard be met at this point.
In most sites that come into Burnsville, most developers are required to do this, so, right. And then there was one more, the landscape and islands at the end of, and that was in retail building E, and which is the larger retail building, correct?
On the east side, yep.
I thought in the plans I saw islands at the end. Is that not?
There are on some of the parking stalls. So you'll note there are on the ends of all three and the beginning of only one of the three, if you consider the beginning to be closer to the store.
Okay,
And so it would just be putting a parking lot landscape island at the beginning or the front of those other two that are, I guess, essentially the middle aisle and the eastern aisle.
and by doing so, they would meet the standards for,
Correct, yeah, because it's only on areas with 25 stalls or greater in a row.
okay. I think that was all, was there one more? I believe that was it.
I believe that was all of them, because we kind of covered the
We covered the other ones.
impervious with the green space discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, commissioners, do you have any questions for city staff? Commissioner Timmerman?
Just some follow-ups if you'd leave it on the screen here. So I guess the first question before I go into the suggestion I might have is, has the applicant seen these proposals? Is this something that you've not been able to hash out and negotiate with them, or did they present this and just didn't make the updates? Cause it's a little uncommon to have this many items that the staff doesn't support, so I'm curious if there's been some challenges negotiating these with the applicant.
Deb, do you wanna, since you've been conferring with the applicant, do you wanna maybe take that one?
Yep, we have identified in our planning reviews, our review memos to the applicant, that we would not be supportive of some of these deviations because it's a complete tear down of the entire site and then rebuild. So we feel that there's opportunity there to meet the minimums of the ordinance.
Okay, so that's helpful to know, and I guess what I was thinking about here is, we're already looking at reducing the total number of parking stalls, which again would be a deviation. In my mind, less important than some of the others, but would they be able to more easily meet some of the other deviations if we further reduce the required parking? And the reason I say that is that Cub Foods currently has so much wasted parking, and I would much rather see green space than parking stalls if it could be pulled off. So, I mean, is that something that could be further used as negotiation to get them up to those minimums in the green space areas, in the plantings at the end of the parking rows, things of that nature?
From a planning perspective, we did review the traffic information that the applicant provided. And then they're able to, because it's in a mixed-use zoning district and because they're next to transit and there is actually a transit stop, they're able to reduce parking just based on that mixed zoning district. So we did that. So it's not really a deviation, we just called it out. In the parking schedule, they would need the higher amount, but they're actually meeting the ordinance, the mixed district, because they have those other, opportunities, have the transit opportunities, et cetera. So, they're fine with that.
Okay, understood.
Commissioner Wad?
More green space would mean a little bit less parking, is that correct? Or is it-
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways it could be used. If there was more green space, you could use it up parking to make that green space. I mean, that's
Yeah,
one
or
of the
like the-
trade-offs you could have, yeah.
Yeah, and that would be okay, because there's plenty, across the whole site, there's plenty of parking.
With an approved deviation.
Yeah, with an approved deviation, yeah.
Or they could look at modifying some of the building pad sizes. They have the three,
I suppose everything's,
retail ones, so yeah, it's
All kind of
all,
it's all
Tied
done on
together,
paper.
so
related.
it'd be up to their engineer to make the site work in terms of how they want it to operate functionally from a access point and, drive aisles and things like that, and how circulation goes for traffic versus how it works for parking where the building sites are. So it's all kind of a little bit of a numbers game or a little bit of layout game
Yeah.
on how they could essentially modify to increase those green space areas and then decrease the impervious surface. Some of it could come out of parking, some of it could come out of the retail sites, some of it could come out of just reworking how the access is for different areas. Those are all possibilities.
there'd be an opportunity as well if they took a look at maybe possibilities for pervious pavers. You can get up to a 10% credit on a green space if there are some areas, that would make sense that wise. But again, that would take some looking into by the applicant and their engineers to see what's appropriate for them.
Thank you.
Mr. Timmerman?
Just to continue on that, I mean, we are talking about minimums here, and when we're talking about a complete tear down, rebuild into an area that is wholly part of our center village vision, I mean, it is very important that we try to meet those minimums in my mind. And so I'd like to see some sort of work on compromising in those areas. So I appreciate you calling these issues out. One of the other questions that I had, can you talk a little bit about access in from the County Road 42 and McAndrews? It sounded like there would be a new, like, through a private road almost, and I'm curious more about that and the left and right turns in and out from both of the county roads and how traffic will move.
So there is, they do have an existing access, the Cub Foods today has an existing access on the County Road 42.
Right turn only, right?
Right, or they,
Right, it's a right in, right out.
Right in, right out,
currently,
yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
that's how they're proposing to keep it, is right in, right out.
Okay.
On both McAndrews and the, County Road 42. So it would just, the only addition really, or the only change on the McAndrews side is they're adding a right turn lane.
Okay.
So that's this piece here, shown in yellow, the bituminous pavement, there's a turn lane shown. I guess if you're going north on County Road 5, take a right on McAndrews, and then to access into the site, there will be a right turn lane along there. So that's the proposed change, I guess, from that. Otherwise, there is, because of how Cub Foods exists today, where it's more in the center of the site versus reconfiguring how it is now, there will be kind of like a private north-south access between County Road 38 and County Road 42.
Okay. And this is a great screen to have up, should touch on my last question, but is your inclination that limiting access directly from the Cub Foods and the new development to this gas station will actually be, I don't see why it's an issue to limit that. Frankly, driving between Cub and that gas station right now feels more dangerous than just going back out to the county road and making your way to the gas station, because people fly through that parking lot, which would change. Presumably the traffic flow within the parcels would change, but I mean, what is, other than maybe saving 30 seconds, what is the actual concern with taking that access out?
So I can speak at least in terms of the accessibility between them. I know this was also a point brought up by the Dakota County Plat Commission because of all the county roads this site buffers or abuts against. In terms of the internal access, it was just to alleviate or reduce the amount of trips that go out onto county roads to then take an immediate access back into the Holiday gas station. So to reduce the amount of trips that need to exit and then re-enter the site. And that was a concern from the Dakota County Plat Commission. I wasn't at some of those meetings, so if there's specific questions on that, I would defer to Deb or Sarah on those. Because I know that was a conversation that was discussed with the Dakota County Plat Commission on a requirement for the access in and out on county roads.
Do you have one of the renderings that maybe has the gas station so we can kind of see traffic flow in there as it's proposed?
So the current drawings don't show a connection. So that's one of the conditions to add a connection. So none of these are gonna show a connection to the Holiday.
Okay.
That connection would be on the south end, correct?
Yeah, it would be most likely with the retail C.
Right, there's currently a connection there at the southern part. Yeah.
Okay. All right, just curious where that came from. Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson?
From my thought on that, I'm guessing it's from turning out a Holiday onto Irving, then immediately having to make another left directly back into the parking lot, because you might need to wait for traffic there, and that can, if you don't have to wait and block other people's traffic, that might be one of the reasons they're looking at, but that's just my thought when I was looking at that. But I did have two questions. You mentioned signage. The plan is to only have one sign for the whole place, right on 42?
One major monument sign for each of the retail tenants, and then there were smaller monument signs that were conceptually shown for retail A, B, and C, but those haven't been identified as to what they would look like, so staff just included condition on there that they have to meet the ordinance standards for maximum height. But the intent is to have the one major monument sign that's 24 feet tall for the entire retail
So
site.
nothing on Irving or McAndrews or anything like that?
Nothing shown right at this time. They could identify future signage as part of their final PUD development plan, but at this point, it's just the one.
Okay, and then for the crosswalks, you mentioned the cost is pretty much the same.
I mean, I
What's
couldn't
like
speak
kind
to
of the-
exactly the cost, but it's not, hundreds of thousands of dollars type of, is what I'm trying to get at. There's not a huge discrepancy between the two in terms of installation of the differing pavement styles.
Did they give a reason for the pushback? I mean, I personally like the idea of having the different.
I guess you'd have to direct that question to the applicant because they could potentially respond to it.
My plan, Commissioner Anderson, is to have the applicant come up and answer the same questions so we can see where everybody stands on it.
Sounds like a plan.
That's my plan.
I don't remember my questions.
Yeah, Commissioner Wallace.
Ms. Garros, I guess this question's directed to you because I actually liked the suggestion you made, because since we're obviously falling short on some of the green space, and you brought up, you know, the permeable pavers, and we're looking for a different crosswalk substance. I mean, my suggestion would be, hey, can we, you know, ask the applicant to put in the permeable pavers as their crosswalk? That will help out with the green space and differentiate the materials from the typical, you know, drive. I don't know if that was brought up as a suggestion, but that would be my suggestion.
It has not yet. That is something that is available. For permeable pavers, you do have to look at what the, you know, what the ground is underneath, you know, for supporting that. So between their engineer and the city engineer, they would take a look. But that could be something that would be workable for those pedestrian ways, being something different than the asphalt permeable
There's gonna be a
pavers.
win-win for at least two of the current deviations, so.
Exactly, yes.
Good deal.
Well, Chair, I would recommend adding that as an extra point then.
Okay, we'll have to remember that when we come to that point. Good point, though. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Ms. Lloyd, there's some talk about the drainage of the site. Is everything up to par as far as engineering is concerned?
Yeah, everything looks good from a drainage and grading perspective on the site.
Okay, so no concerns with engineering? Well, that's great to hear. Any other questions for city staff? Commissioner Timmerman?
Well, I was just gonna say, thanks for being here. I mean, we have that much trust in you that
Oh, she has.
we needed,
yeah.
so.
You bet.
Good night. No,
Oh, no, she's gotta hang out. We
Oh,
got more to do. It's a busy night tonight. With that, Mr. Shea, I really appreciate the presentation. Great job. And I'm gonna turn it over to the public hearing, which is still open. Anyone in the, here that would like to speak to this issue is welcome to come to the lectern. If there is anybody on Zoom, I haven't had any notice from inside the booth yet. Okay, it doesn't look like anything's on Zoom, and so I'm gonna ask the applicant, you'd like to have the people bring out their questions so we can answer all at once. If the applicant would be willing to come up and speak. And we're gonna put you on the spot, I apologize.
It's fine.
If you could just state your name and the address for for the record, thank you.
Sure. My name is Dustin Hicks. I'm with the property owner, Sterling or SVAP1. Sterling Organization is the management company. We're at 302 Datura Street, West Palm Beach, Florida.
Okay.
I've got with me Brian Wardeman from Kimley Horn, who's a civil engineer for the project.
Good deal. Thank you for both coming in today. So if we could start right with these deviations.
Sure.
And to start with, I believe it is the green space in the parking lot.
Sure.
What's the reason we want to deviate?
Sure. You know, as you know, this site's been tried to be redeveloped for quite some time. CUB's been working on it for at least 15 years, from what they said, and maybe longer than that. It's just the current real estate manager. You know, CUB and the other retailers that we're speaking with, particularly the other anchor, you know, have very stringent parking requirements in order to, you know, operate their business. And, you know, they actually prefer a lot more parking than what we've shown on the plan. But we've explained to them that, you know, in order to facilitate this development, not only do we need to make sure the project works as a whole, we also need to make sure we get approvals from the city. So really the reflection of what you're seeing on the plan as far as the amount of green space, the amount of parking is really driven by working with staff, but also working with the tenants that are ultimately going to facilitate this redevelopment to occur, to allow their needs to be met as well in terms of the number of parking spaces. So, you know, oftentimes we think there's too much parking. Certainly you all think there may be too much parking, but the retailers that are ultimately going to be opening brand new stores and investing, you know, millions of dollars here want to have their requirements met too. And they're honestly the experts at how their operation's going to work. So we've tried to incorporate as many of staff comments, and we've gone through a couple rounds, right, of staff review, and have done quite a bit of negotiation with staff already to incorporate as many comments as we could. I think if you looked at our initial application versus what we have now, a lot of staff comments have been incorporated. There were a couple things that were mentioned, and I don't know if you want to, we go through
Sure.
all the questions, or a few other things I wanted to make sure were clarified.
Absolutely, go ahead.
There are some, there are actually two monument signs that are proposed on the submittal. So not only is that the main pylon sign, which was shown on the screen, but there's two 6-foot tall monument signs at both the entrance on McAndrews as well as the entrance on Irving. And that size and placement was at the direction of staff to be in compliance with the code. But I do want to clarify, because I think a comment was made that there were no other signs. Another topic that was discussed was the connection to holiday fuel. I just want to make sure we state clearly, we as the property owner are more than happy to accommodate a connection to holiday gas. We've actually approached them about providing a connection, internal connection to our property. So the staff condition that's being recommended of if the other party, the holiday gas, allows for connection either now or in a future redevelopment, we would be more than happy to agree to that condition of approval to provide that easement for that connection to occur, because we actually would prefer to have it as well.
Good.
Brian might touch on a couple other points as well.
Good evening, Chair, members of the commission. Just a couple other things to kind of call to note, that we've had some conversations with staff on and some other various items. So relative to the pedestrian crosswalks, we'd responded and said that we are amenable to finding some way to distinguish those. It's just a matter of evaluating some of those from a pricing perspective with contractors and then working that into the plan. So the intent is to.
And not just a pricing perspective, but also a maintenance. There was a suggestion made about the impermeable pavers, and our experience with shopping centers throughout the country is those work great for parking stalls. They don't hold up very well for, to the level of providing a nice smooth surface for pedestrian. So while it makes sense today, we're looking at 4 or 5 years down the road, we want to make sure that pedestrian connection is in really good condition, because that's where people are going to be walking. And as folks that get lots of suits from trip and fall, we're always making sure that we have materials down that are going to be in really good condition years down the road. Sorry, Brian.
Yep. Relative to the parking rows at the end of the landscape islands, we've incorporated landscape islands at the end of each parking row, with the exception of those rows that would have ADA accessible parking stalls at the end of them. ADA guidelines would like for the most direct path from a parking stall into a building, which is the reason why we've negated putting landscape islands at the end of those rows. Like I said, all the other ones that do not provide ADA parking, though, do have the islands. So just one clarification there. Additionally, there was one more comment relative to increased impervious surface coverage to 81.5% on lots 1 and 2. Specifically, I guess our preference would be for this development to be evaluated in totality for all lots, since there will be cross parking, cross access, etc., that we'd rather the entire project be defined by the percentage as opposed to lot 1 versus lot 4. It's just more challenging to kind of break it up that way. One other thing to just note, relative to the access out to McAndrews on the north side, there is an existing full access today for the Cub Foods. As part of this project, that access would be limited to a right in, right out as part of the improvements. And that access would be also shifted more towards the center of the site, which provides better spacing to both Irving and County Road 5.
That absolutely makes sense. Thank you so much. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to be able to hear both sides of the argument to ensure.
Oh, of course. No, we
that
appreciate the opportunity to come up and
They
speak. And
anticipated they would talk tonight.
Yeah, right.
yeah, and we're extremely excited about this redevelopment. We've owned the property for going on 6 years now. Have been working with Cub that long to try to put this together. It requires other deals to make this happen. We did seek public assistance, financial assistance from the city of Burnsville, but determined that that wasn't going to be the avenue the city wanted to go. So we are not seeking any public assistance on this. So it is important that we kind of have the combination of all of these tenants that we're showing on this plan, some that we know, some that we don't quite know, in order to facilitate a redevelopment. It's 137,000 feet today, but really it's almost zero, because half the building is currently vacant because it's unleasable. And if Cub's not in a new store soon, they're going to have to close the existing, because it's they're already getting health violations, and it's as you all know the site, it's in dire condition. So we're really excited about this and hope we can get approval because it really facilitates, we think, a great redevelopment.
Absolutely. Any other questions for the applicant, Commissioner Anderson?
First, I would like to say thank you for, answering all these questions that we have, especially geared towards the questions we were asking all you guys. I was just wondering when you were talking about the changing of the road on McAndrews. So if somebody was going west on McAndrews, is the goal then to get, if you wanted to go to Cub Foods, to then have to do a U-turn on 5 to come back to the right entrance only, or to turn on Irving and go through a couple different parking lots to get to Cub Food?
The latter.
Okay.
Right. And as you can see on the plan, there's a fairly direct shot from that Irving access point to the Cub Food parking lot.
Okay.
To allow that exact movement that you described.
Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Watt?
No question, but just a comment that it looks like again, thank you for presenting, and it looks like a very nice project. It's super close, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, but nice work, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for answering our questions. We are really excited about this, so.
Great.
We appreciate
Well,
you
thank you all.
wanting
And
to
if you have any other comments during the discussion, we're happy to come back up.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, commissioners, what do you think? Commissioner Timmerman?
I have a couple more questions for staff. So to the comments about the ADA at the end of the parking rows and eliminating the islands, I mean, that seems reasonable. Can you respond to that?
I guess I hadn't heard that reasoning before with the ADA. If it's to meet ADA guidelines, I mean, obviously city staff wants to meet ADA guidelines for sites as well. We want those to be accessible. So if that's the reasoning for it, from a staff perspective, I don't have any issue changing the recommendation on that one. Deb, if you have any other thoughts?
No, I concur with that.
Okay, so when we get to that time, let's figure out how we can phrase that for a recommendation. And then, I guess just a little bit of insight about the cross-project impervious surface, like was mentioned. Is that something that was considered, can be considered? We're considering it for parking. Can we consider it in this case?
It's difficult, at least to consider for the retail sites A, B, and C, which we don't know the lot layout yet to know what is
Even the
impervious or
final
what,
size,
right? And that's something, if we're looking at the site as a whole, if it does meet the 75%, I think that would meet the intent of the ordinance to be, 75% as a total, if you're looking at it. So I think if we look at that as a whole, staff would be supportive of having, the goal is to have 75% impervious in this district is the goal. So having 75% across this whole site would be meeting the intent of the ordinance.
So
But we
again,
only called it out on the lots 1 and 2 because those are the lots that are being fully developed or proposed to be fully developed with this approval.
I think when we get to the staff recommendation, we might just need to compare what the language is in the recommendation itself and keep in mind that, maybe we say something like this for these particular lots or 75% across the entire project, but I'm not exactly sure what the recommendation says until we get that screen up either, so. Okay, that's it, thanks.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Watt?
A procedure question.
Sure.
Do we need to close the public hearing?
Well, you know what, that's a good idea.
Eventually we should.
I'm glad you're here. With that, I will close the public hearing at 7:23. And
7:23 on
on June 12th.
June 12th.
Yes.
It's been open for a couple weeks.
It's been a good month now, I think, yeah? Yeah.
That was all I had.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Watt chases me on the Roberts rules, and I'm glad he's able to do that. The through street, obviously that's gonna be used both for private use, and then people are gonna try to sneak through there. But there's not much you can do about that. I think it opens things up, though, as far as that area, and it brings customers in, which I think is good for the facility. Overall, I think this is a great project. This will be a great enhancement to that Cub Foods, obviously, that's gonna be huge. Plus, it brings in 4 or 5 more tenants, I mean, we really, I think this is a win-win situation, so. I'd like to hear a recommendation, or that we give to the city council. Do we wanna still talk some things through? Are we looking at the impervious site, or the?
I think Mr. Shea is getting us there. I
I
was just
assume this
waiting
is
for
the
the
slide
screen.
you were looking for.
So, let's kind of talk through the language of the recommendation then, because, and Mr. Shea, maybe you can help us find the ones that we were asking about.
So as far as at least the parking lot islands at the beginning of end of each row, we would modify condition 18 to remove that requirement and then say that the, essentially it would be to remove that requirement because they wouldn't have to have them at the beginning and end of each row, but just that the, you could include a condition if you wanted with the, saying the plans as shown on the June 12th meeting are appropriate for the number of, because I don't know how else you would describe that those are the 2 exempt aisles or rows, but something to that effect.
Normally, we say something to that effect, and then Deb kind of does some.
That's fine too, yep, yeah, I'm giving you suggestions on the fly, but you can certainly, we can leave it broad and then Deb and I can, refine between now and the council meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, if I,
Commissioner Watt?
so, I think that a change to that, requirement should be tied to the ADA parking spots, because there are other configurations for the ADA parking spots that would allow for parking islands. You know, what's probably more important is that they meet the ADA requirement of, you know, access route, and I'm not an expert, I'm not sure if this meets it or not, so this.
I totally agree with that, finding that, sorry, Chair.
Commissioner Timmerman?
I can call out myself, you
Yes.
have to. It is tying that to the actual,
Yeah.
the actual law. I'm trying to imagine what other grocery stores currently have, and I'm thinking of one, in Savage, a newer one in Savage right now. I won't name it because we don't have one in Burnsville.
Nor do we need it.
Well,
We've got Cub Foods right here.
well, that's exactly right.
Absolutely.
We're here to support Cub Foods at the moment. So, but the, my recollection anyway is that they do have flat, and so maybe it's with the grocery store where there's a lot of in and out of vehicles and there's a potential for more needs for ADA, I guess purposes. I'm just trying to imagine what other grocery stores currently have, and I think they do have what the applicant suggested, so.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, let's maybe have it,
I think, as he said, it should be tied to this plan configuration.
Yeah.
If this is the plan
Yeah.
configuration, great, because then if, you know, if all the ADA spots end up being clustered in one spot, and then we have, you know, parking lots without without parking islands at the end, then it was kind of a switcheroo, so.
yeah. Deb, do you kind of have that?
Yep,
You got that down, okay.
taking notes, got it.
This isn't her first rodeo, she's got this.
All right, and then, Mr. Shea, the one about the impervious surface.
So that would just be a recommendation that we would bring forward, just because it's not included as a condition, it's included as a PUD deviation. So that would just be a recommendation from planning commission to the city council that we would include, but doesn't need to amend any of the conditions, I don't believe, as I'm scanning through.
Okay.
Commissioner Anderson, you have a confused look on your face.
I was kind of curious if you could go back one slide. A liquor license shall be obtained from the city for the liquor store. Is this a different liquor store that's going to be moving in there? Why would they need a new license if it's the same one?
I can address that. I did check with the city clerk, and it's a different building, and they've talked with the applicant, so they're aware that they just need the separate liquor license. It isn't a problem, it's just a matter of going through the city council to get the license.
Okay,
Yep.
just curious.
Yep, I know, I was wondering too, can they just transfer it? Nothing's easy.
Not enough red tape then, right? Any other comments, concerns, recommendations, sort of things?
We'll
Commissioner
make a
Timmerman?
recommendation sort of thing.
Well, Commissioner Timmerman, the floor is yours.
I would like to recommend that the planning commission also recommend to the city council approval of the application of the SVAP to Burnsville Market LLC for concept stage PUD, development stage PUD, preliminary and final plat and variance to allow for the creation of 4 lots, the redevelopment of the Cub Food grocery store, grocery building, and development of 6 commercial retail buildings, subject to the conditions we discussed with the 2 changes we also discussed related to adding a recommendation regarding impervious surface across the entire property or project, and related to the ADA accommodation for the end of some of the parking aisles.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Timmerman. Do you feel comfortable with that, Commissioner Wallace? With what he
Yes.
says? Okay,
Yes,
just making sure.
thank you.
All right. Commissioner Awad?
I will second the motion.
Okay, I got a motion by Commissioner Timmerman, second by Commissioner Awad for recommendation to City Council. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It is unanimous. It will end up on the consent agenda on June 20th. That's a Tuesday, 5:30 in these very chambers. And thank you so much for coming in, and we really appreciate the helping out Burnsville. It's going to be a great project and a great partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thank you, Mr. Shea. Great presentation again. And with that, we're going to move on to number 4 on our agenda, and that's a continued public hearing as well. I'm going to be better about closing this one. You'll see. It is a conditional use permit for new car wash use, Club Car Wash, southeast of Highway 13 East and Diffley Road. Here to speak on this matter is one of our city planners, Ms. Deb Garros. Ms. Garros, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Just saying, not funny. I've never seen this here before. I get it.
But it is funny.
I would like to think that was for the 3rd grade students who wrote the essays.
Yes.
There you go.
Maybe the
There
mayor
you
left
go,
a few,
yes.
I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
Exactly. I gotta lighten things up a bit. Okay. For the subject site, this is very similar to our last site. It's a mixed zoning district. We also have a situation where the roads abutting the site are not controlled by the city of Burnsville. Highway 13 is through MnDOT. Diffley Road is a county road, County Road 30. And then there is a north-south road that's in the city of Eagan and was once owned by MnDOT, but is now with the city of Eagan. So we're looking at, it's a 3.07 acre site. The car wash site itself is, it's proposed to be in the middle part of the project. We'll be looking at public hearing for preliminary and final plat following this meeting. Couldn't combine them just because this had started and was continued, and the plat application, we have to start a new public hearing for that, so that is why that is the case. With the subject site, it consists of 2 different parcels, pretty much developed in the early 1960s. On the right-hand side, you see where the Diffley 13 site is, and then Metcalf School is in Eagan, so this is right on the border. And the north-south road there is used by Metcalf School, and then also is an access to the shopping center as well. So this is the existing road, north-south road that we've been discussing. And what's changing on this project from existing conditions is that ultimately with the plat, they're looking at closing off the north driveway directly to Diffley from the old Mr. B's car wash. So closing that off and then getting access primarily from that north-south drive. So the application before you is for conditional use permit. It is for Club Car Wash, which is a tunnel car wash, very similar to some of the previous applications that we have had. This use is permitted with a conditional use permit. The site itself, basically people will drive in along the north-south road in Eagan and then enter the site, and they'll drive over to the west to Highway 13. So they enter the car wash from the west and then drive to the east. There will be also vacuum cleaners on the south side of the building. So those parking spaces there are shown a little bit larger, basically because of that. They do have a trash enclosure, which is on the very south part of the site, which we can talk about in a moment. And they do meet their parking standards for car washes. We look at the number of stacking spaces. They're required to have 4 per each drive lane. They've got 16, so they far exceed what the ordinance standard is. Oh, that's nice. Alrighty.
It's fancy.
Yeah, there you go. A box in a box. Sports. Okay. So the building that they're proposing is 5,700 square feet. And then they are less than the maximum impervious surface. So they're proposing to be at 67%. They can be up to 75. So what that does is they are providing more green space than the 25% minimum. They have 33% green space. Also, the way that parking or the green space within the parking area is calculated, they're a lot higher. They're at 18% versus 3%, and they are meeting the 30% building perimeter landscape standard. So in terms of, this is the site plan, and the car wash itself is basically a 150-foot long car wash. They are looking at they do have parking that's located just right outside the building here for employees, or if someone, should need to come in for any purpose. So they do have parking there. They are also providing for bike parking in the same area. So they meet that objective of the mixed zoning district as well. The applicant indicated that at any time they have from 2 to 4 employees. It just depends on the situation. Their hours, they are somewhat different between summer and winter months, but basically Monday through Saturday from 7 in the morning till 8 p.m. Winter hours are from 7 to 7 p.m. And then on Sunday, 8 to 8 p.m. or in winter hours, 8 to 7 o'clock. So relatively early closing time when you consider, impacts to other properties. This is the overall site plan for the entire acreage, and on this plan, there is a Scooters car wash, or Scooters coffee shop that is going to be proposed on Lot 1. That does not need any special approvals from the city. They can come in and just apply for their commercial building permit for that. And then Lot 2 is the car wash. Lot 3 does not have a tenant yet, so that one will be available for future development. In terms of the club car wash, they do have varying heights. It is a nice looking facility. The highest point they have 2 towers on either end, so that's 27 feet. The car wash itself is about 18 feet high, and then they've got a smaller cashier area and storage that's 15 feet. So you have differing heights and projections for the building. In terms of the exterior materials that are proposed, they're primarily looking at CMU using different colors, and that is a permitted material. They do have glass on 4 sides of these towers, the end towers, so they're actually exceeding the glass requirements facing a street, which would be on the east and west. They are exceeding the standard, and in addition to that, they have a couple of canopies that'll be red. So it's an attractive building. Signage that's proposed, they have 3 wall signs that are shown, and those do meet the standards of the ordinance in terms of the area that's permitted. In terms of the architecture, meaning the ordinance, and then also the, let's see, what is that? Yeah, the architectural tool, that's it. All right, but they've got defined building base, middle and top, horizontal and vertical features, the varied roof lines and building depths, 26% windows on the west side, 27% on the east, and the standard is 25%. So they're exceeding in all of those areas. The floor plan, pretty straightforward. Basically, you've got the equipment and some office area, bathrooms for the employees, and then the car wash bay itself with the cashier/storage on the other side of the building. For tree removals, this is going to be discussed more in the plat part of the project, but they do have some tree removals that are shown, and they also have provided a landscape plan. Their landscape plan is kind of in two different pieces. There's proposed trees and then a separate piece for where they're showing proposed landscaping. So they are exceeding the overall green space standard. They're providing 33% as opposed to 25%. Again, the green in the parking area, 18% instead of 30%. And then they are meeting the 30% exterior perimeter plantings. They do have 20 trees that are being proposed on site. It's a nice mix between the ornamental and overstory trees. They will provide year-round interest. There's also the shrubs that are proposed. Both have flowering shrubs and trees. Both have berry or other fruit type varieties that are proposed. So the again, the application, it does meet our 25% diversity standard and our requirements. In terms of the north-south street, we have talked with the city of Eagan, and then also with Dakota County and MnDOT, actually, because these are the different properties. As far as the city of Eagan, they are requesting, and we've included it in a condition, this would be subject to how Planning Commission and Council feels, but the applicant had proposed an 8-foot tall privacy fence located along the central part of Lot 2. And that is a screening fence, which does meet the ordinance. From Eagan's perspective, they're looking at these as front yards, and they're looking at conceptually, no approvals yet, but conceptually residential, mixed-use residential. So they had requested, rather than putting in privacy fence, if there could be landscaping. So we did include a condition to do this. Planning Commission and Council can change that. What the applicant is proposing does meet the ordinance. The other thing I just wanted to identify for you is there would be ultimately three driveway accesses for the different 3 lots. Lots 1 and 2 have a joint access, so that would be shared. And then there is a south driveway access on Lot 2, and then Lot 3 also has its own separate. And they're all joined internally to the site by this drive lane, this common drive lane. The trash enclosure is on the south side of the building. It does meet the city's ordinance in terms of it'll be comprised of the similar materials as the exterior building and have the gates. So that also meets the ordinance. And we have the grading plan. If there are particular questions, basically the site is very flat. It's been developed for umpteen decades, so not a lot of changes coming in terms of grading. They are proposing on this lot to have an underground storm water system, and that also does meet the city's ordinance. And this is just the utility plan. All the utilities are available to the site. In this project and in this area of the city, there actually are some of the utility lines are shared between Burnsville and the city of Eagan. So there will ultimately, when that project comes in for development, there will need to be a joint powers agreement that'll be worked through with our city engineer for those utilities. And in terms of the recommendations, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit. There are a number of recommendations. However, these are fairly straightforward. A demo permit, we just wanted to note that will be needed, and that's to allow the sewer access charges to be transferred from the existing to the proposed. They're very expensive, so we just want to make sure that the applicant takes advantage of that. Item 2 is long, and what this is basically all of the old conditional use permits that have been applied for over the decades for the site. So this is something that we have done pretty consistently, and the city attorney has recommended this well. Basically, this is to repeal the previous approvals and all of the various conditions so that they start with a clean slate with a new conditional use permit and don't have to be encumbered by these old plans and old approvals. Number 3 relates to the joint access. There does need to be joint access and maintenance agreements put in place, and those are for the shared driveways and then also for that shared drive lane, if you will, between the properties. And they would need to provide copies of those at the time of building permit. We are recommending that the sidewalk be extended. Right now, it goes to a proposed, you can see on this one, it goes to a proposed crossing, pedestrian crossing. So they have provided for the different materials for that pedestrian crossing, basically getting you from the building. And then they're proposing a sidewalk in this location, and then on the very east side, this is actually not on the applicant's property, but it would be within the city of Eagan. So we are recommending that this sidewalk be continued down to the south. And ultimately, this will connect to an existing sidewalk up at Diffley Road on the south side of Diffley Road. Securities, we do have securities requirements that anytime that you do paving, curb and gutter. So that is number 5. Number 6, because they do have some things shown outside of the boundaries of the site, we are recommending that they provide written permission from the respective owners that any facilities, trees, etc. that they're showing are acceptable to them. They will need a tree removal permit prior to any work being done at the site. And then tree contractor's license is a requirement. And also to meet with the city forester on the site, just to make sure that any tree protection is put in place. And then there's a landscape security, same as the paving and curb and gutter. Landscape plans do need to be modified in 2 places. They just need to show the overstory trees, increase the size from 2 to 2.5 inch. And then also the shrub plantings need to be shown in feet and inches to meet the ordinance. So very minor types of things. We talked about written permission from the easement and right-of-way holders. There's easement and right-of-way on the west side of the property. There's a 20-foot right-of-way easement that runs down the entire west side, and also a 15-foot easement for underground natural gas. So again, looking at that. We are looking at, this is the condition number 14 that I was talking about before. With the city of Eagan, they had suggested having screening provided with the 2 rows of plantings. And like I say, the applicants, their fence does meet the requirement. So they are showing currently fence and landscaping on the inside, facing their project. So Planning Commission may want to change that. We are also recommending that additional shrubs be planted along Highway 13. They are proposing them mostly along that area, but we're proposing that those go again further to the south because those are where the vacuum cleaners are located. Sign permit, they'll need that before posting any exterior signs. It's a standard requirement. Exterior light fixtures, downcast, hooded, shielded fixtures. The applicant's information that they provided does meet the illumination standards and the height standards of the ordinance. And then just in generally, the CUP would be subject to approval of the plat because they're proposing this to be on Lot 2. And then outstanding comments from the city engineer from their June 1st memo still would need to be addressed, and they would need to provide a stormwater maintenance agreement for that underground system. So with that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garros. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Wallace?
Yes, Ms. Girls, just one question in regards to roadway and access. Obviously, I mean, they've been very patient while we waited to hear from Egan. I'm glad that, is getting worked out. However, there's that access road off Highway 13 that goes into the property too. Will that remain or will that be taken away?
We will talk about that with the plat, but that, let's see here, it's not shown there.
I think it's further south there.
Yeah, you can kind of see it. They are proposing to close that access as well. It actually comes along the south side of the
Right.
property and then comes to Highway 13 here. So the proposal with the plat then would be that that access be removed as well.
Okay,
So the only access would be along this north-south.
so now I don't have a shortcut to get my car washed.
Sorry.
No, thank you, and that explained it. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Commissioner Watt?
So on the east side, the property ends before the access road. And is the access road owned by Egan, or is that owned by the next door neighborhood, the people that bought Metcalf?
It's actually owned by the city of Egan. When the intersection of Highway 13 and Diffley was last updated, MnDOT actually purchased this piece of land and they platted it as a right-of-way plat. At some point in time, they turned it over to Egan, so it's relatively news to Egan that they owned this. They had always thought it was MnDOT's.
Why did we
So,
tell them?
There we go. Yeah, so.
And part of the reason I ask is one of the conditions, I guess, it has to do with obtaining permission from that property owner about landscaping or whatever that's happening across the property line. Is that considered a boulevard on the road, or is that, who's the owner? Is Egan?
It's the city of
City of
Egan.
Egan is the owner, okay.
Yep. And I believe in discussions with the applicant, I believe that they've come up with an agreement that Egan will allow the accesses that are proposed.
Okay.
And hopefully the improvements as shown as well. That's something that, like I say, we just got an email from the city of Egan, but I believe that everything is moving in that direction.
So I have a follow-up about the vinyl fence.
Sure.
So the vinyl fence meets our code,
Yes,
and the city of Egan would prefer that there be trees planted there.
yes.
That,
Could meet our code as well. The requirement is that it be screened.
oh, that is screening, and they would prefer to see trees, and I'm just wondering, I'm a little uncomfortable making that a hard requirement of the applicant when what they propose meets our ordinance, and maybe that's part of the negotiations between them and Egan or something, but again, for us to make it one of the requirements makes me a little uncomfortable. That was all I had to say.
It's a great point.
Yeah, no, it's a,
Okay.
Commissioner Timmerman?
I was actually going to bring up the same point, that I wonder how we can recommend something when it's allowed by ordinance. I think with conversation with the applicant, maybe they'd be willing to make the change. Maybe this is new news. Maybe it'd be cheaper to do landscaping. Maybe it'd make everybody happy. So I personally am not, I'm with Commissioner Watt. I'm not comfortable with the recommendation on that, but I think there's ways to get there.
Commissioner Watt?
I have another question. It's condition 11 about providing the shrub height in feet and inches instead of gallons. We have minimums there?
yes,
Okay, so it's more than just providing the height in feet and inches. It's providing the height in feet and inches that
are
show-
required by the Schedule basically the landscape
Yeah.
schedule.
So should that be changed to say that it needs to meet our ordinance?
Can certainly do that.
Otherwise, it seems kind of, you could provide it in feet and inches, but it doesn't meet the ordinance.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, you can certainly do that.
So that'd be a proposed change, is to just clarify that number 11 should meet the ordinance.
Sounds good. Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Anderson?
I'm just kind of curious, especially after the last development we were looking at. When we see that the percentages for the green space is higher than the requirement, which I personally love, is that just for the section right around where the car wash is going to be, or is that considering all the area? Like how we talked about, can it be included in one when we're looking at all three sections together, or is it just the section in the middle that's
This one,
feeding
it's
them?
just for lot 2, because this is the only one that they need a conditional use permit for.
Okay.
In a planned unit development, that's kind of one of the benefits or reasons for doing a PUD is you can interchange, green space, parking, there are a number of things, signage, to around the PUD. So it meets like the overall standard for all of the properties. In this case, with just a conditional use permit, we're just dealing with this one lot.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? One of the drawings showed a circle around one of the entrances stating on the access road, I believe it was the second one down. Was that one gonna have to be blocked off as well? The second or third one down? I'm sorry, as far as the access is, in our report, not necessarily on this
Okay,
screening.
yep. The applicant is proposing not to use this existing, and this is a private license agreement between the owner of this property and the Rivers that dates back, I'm not sure how far. But they are indicating that they would be closing the access to Highway 13. So we do have a condition, I'm not sure if it's in here, I think it's with the plat, the next one, that they work with MnDOT to close it to whatever is required, and then that the existing area be turned back to turf.
Okay. But none of the other accesses going down that north-south Egan Road would need to be removed. They're both,
Correct.
okay.
Well, they are, I think that they are, actually. I think that the plans are showing that, some of those driveways will be a little bit different than what currently is today,
Okay,
but they'll still have access on that.
sure. Well, with that, we do have a public hearing still open. Anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this issue can come to the lectern. If there's anybody on Zoom, nope, nobody on Zoom. So that, with that, I will close the public hearing on June the 12th, 2023 at 7:57 PM. And then I will turn to ask the applicant if they'd like to come up and speak with us at all.
Up to you if you'd like.
We would love to hear from you.
Be careful what you ask.
Right, exactly.
Would you like us to?
Absolutely, if you don't mind,
No, not at all.
I really appreciate, I think you had to deal with 5 government entities, not only City of Burnsville, City of
You get
Egan,
brain damage after a while.
the state to the west, the county to the north, and ISD 191.
Yeah, to save our life, none of it, that road issue, literally, we didn't know anything about it and all of a sudden it pops up. But I think it's worked out right,
Good.
which is to get something done. And Mike Schultz over at Egan was good too. I mean, this is, otherwise the damn thing is never gonna get,
Right,
so.
right.
No, I mean, staff is, it is tough, but we think fair and consistent and predictable. They didn't go all over the map. What you want is somebody who's going like this, right? And that's all you can ever ask for. Unless you're
Right.
trying to go like this, right? Which we're not, so. No, I mean, I think, you know, and as at the end of the day, it is about customers, right? I mean, and we, you know, Scooters is waiting to get going. We don't have a final sign deal with the car wash, but we think that we can get there. A meeting like this is real important, because I think maybe he was watching for a while ago, but anyway. So it's about customers, right? And it's gonna be clean and fresh and done right. I mean, so there's no gimmicks, are there?
That's absolutely
At the
great.
end of the day, there aren't any.
Where are you with the fence?
I don't, you know what, I don't know if it's it's worth the difference anyway, from really who on the other side who's looking back at it. That if we felt, if Mike wants some, I think then we should put some spruce trees in there, you know, that, because that 12 months of the year will shield it, right? So, I mean, if you put a little sapling, what good is that gonna do?
Right.
So at the end of the day, I mean, I think that, I appreciate the comment about, you know, we're complying with that defense, but if we get, let's get it done. I mean, let's finish it and we'll put some decent sized spruce trees spaced out so that really does cut it out. I've done that for 30 years. So,
Do you still have to meet with the city of Eagan on
I
this
don't
at all?
think so, do we?
No.
No, I don't think so, no, we just,
It's
I
separate.
mean, I don't think so, Deb. We just, if they want, if you guys are okay with it, we're okay with it, it's not worth slowing down now.
Sure.
It isn't.
Would, you be willing to put welcome to Burnsville on the fence just next to the gentleman?
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
Kidding. Any other questions for the applicants? Commissioner Anderson?
Not so much a question, more of a comment. I'd just like to say, you know, thank you. I love this idea. That area being redeveloped is going to be a win-win. I love the going above and beyond for all the needs from the city, especially when it comes to the green space, the different trees. I love the mixture of the flowering trees. It's going to be great for the bees and everything. So I personally just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you. These are services that are needed, right?
Absolutely.
You know, you gotta have some business. Right. Well,
Well,
thank you. Thank you
I
for your
want to
objectivity.
thank you again for
Thank you.
the,
Appreciate it.
yeah. Obviously, Mr. Bees is an iconic name in Burnsville dating back, however. The site hasn't been taken care of, so this is going to be a great upgrade to that site. With that, I am going to look for questions, recommendations. Commissioner Wallace has a
I'd be
hand up.
happy to make a motion if there are no more questions.
You do love car washes.
He does.
It's my
It's right
new
next door.
neighborhood car wash
Yeah.
and
No
coffee shop
Just no shortcut.
with no shortcut.
No, sure. You can put one in. You're on the planning commission. Anyway, Commissioner Wallace.
Would you mind going to the other? Oh,
I'm gonna go to the.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a recommendation that the planning commission recommend to city council approval of the conditional use permit for the new car wash use on the 3.07 acres of land formerly known as Mr. B's Car Wash and Riverview Shopping Center located southeast of the intersection of Highway 13 East and Diffley Road, subject to the following conditions with the amendment to 14.
I think it was 11.
Was it 11 for the fence?
No, wait a second, you're right, it was 13.
Split the difference.
Yeah.
Easy
Can you-
enough.
can
With
you
the
clarify?
amendment to number 13.
In
And that-
stating that we're not requiring the fence, correct? If you
No.
want.
That we're not required, that,
We're not requiring them not to use the fence.
Not to use the fence, but it'll be
sounds like it'll
just
get
some
worked out.
screening.
Yes, it'll get worked out.
Yes.
Screening, yep.
Yeah.
Just that screening
Whatever
is
they-
provided.
Yep.
We'll leave it to their discretion.
Absolutely. Okay, I can get behind that. Commissioner Wallace has a motion on the table. Commissioner Anderson,
I'd like to second that.
second by Commissioner Anderson. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No one opposes. That's going to end up on the consent agenda on June the 20th, 5:30 PM here at City Hall for the City Council. That brings us to number 5, which is also a public hearing. And it's again Diffley 13 LLC. It's a preliminary and final plat, 3-lot commercial subdivision of, sorry, my microphone got in the way. Diffley 13, southeast of Highway 13 East and Diffley Road. Here to present is Ms. Garros.
And we can be short on this. Everybody is familiar with the existing site. Again, they are proposing to basically take down everything that's there, the parking, et cetera, and redevelop the property, which will be wonderful. We have that access, and this has really been, with regard to the plat, the biggest kind of unknown and issue for the applicant and staff, and working with the city of Eagan. So we have those same elements. That license agreement, this slide shows kind of where that is. It goes to, this is the existing right-in, right-out access, very south part of the project site. And then it actually kind of comes in through here and all the way along the south property line. So that is where that is. This is the preliminary plat, basically showing the 3 lots. All of the lots meet the area and width standards of the ordinance. They are providing for all of the required easements, no issues there. So the project site is conforming to the ordinance. One of the items that is proposed is to close the existing driveway to Diffley, and then they have proposed to put in this sidewalk segment, so that will be continued to the edge of the subject site. And then this is the sidewalk basically for lot 1 and then lot 2, and we are recommending, staff is recommending that that be continued to the south property line. We have those. This is the final plat, very straightforward. There is not a tenant yet that we're aware of for lot 3, but it would be a mixed zone. So if they, meet the standards, they, like the scooters, can just come in for a commercial building permit. Tree removals are shown. They do have a proposal. Some of the trees will be preserved on the property, 32%. In the mixed district, you can remove up to 60%. They're a little bit over that, so there will be a woodland replacement value that it will need to be provided. And then also, at the time of building permit, security, similar to landscape securities, paving, they do want to make sure that the trees that are proposed to remain do remain, so that would be at the time of building permit. Grading plan, fairly straightforward. Again, pretty flat site, not a whole lot of change occurring. Utility plan, again, utilities are available to all of the sites. The city engineer basically would be looking for a stormwater maintenance agreement for the property. And they are providing erosion control in 2 phases, one for the overall development, and then initially, or secondly, it would be for the individual lot developments. And the recommendation from staff, we are recommending approval, subject to the recommendations in the staff report. These are fairly straightforward. Just again, talking about joint access, maintenance agreements for shared driveways, extending the sidewalk all the way to the south plat boundary. And then also the plans may need to be revised because some of the trees are shown off-site, and then we want to make sure that they're not being charged woodland replacement value for things off-site, and then also that if anything off-site, that the property owners are okay with that. Tree removal permit will be needed. Again, the tree contractor's license. City forester will need to go out on site. And payment for the woodland replacement, again, this may change somewhat based on what the actual numbers are for the trees that are actually on site. They may be preserving more than 28%. Number 10, this deals with the access for the north-south road, having some type of agreement with the city of Eagan. And then also, let's see, these have been drafted by the city attorney. They're looking for the developer to mill and overlay that north-south road. It was constructed, nobody knows really to what standard, but as it will be a road, looking at just a mill and overlay, not a reconstruction. They'll need to work with Dakota County on the closure of the existing access to Diffley Road. They'll also need to work with MnDOT on the southern access, the cut-through that our commissioner loved so much. Make it quick, go drive it a few times.
Just go right over the curb.
There goes Commissioner
yes.
Wallace.
And written easement, or written permission from the easement holders that they're okay with any proposed facilities. And then there are a few minor outstanding comments from the city engineer memo that are requested. And finally, the stormwater maintenance agreement will be needed. With that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garros. Any questions, commissioners? One question I have is, so lot 3 is going to remain vacated. So it's gonna be, the building's gonna be demolished, and then what will occur? Will it just be an open lot?
Yep, basically,
the
yep, they'll
plan?
just grade it and, you know, probably like hydro seed or have some type of a turf established on it. Yep,
Okay.
until somebody buys it and they want to come in for a development.
So it will be an open lot, probably for sale.
Yep,
Okay.
I would think so, yep.
Any other questions? With that, it is a public hearing. I have to open up the public hearing at 8:10. Anyone in the audience may speak to this issue, may come to the lectern. Otherwise, we do have someone up on Zoom. Oh, nobody on Zoom for real. Jared Smith, he is with the car wash, was going to join us, and I believe he is not there. So with that, I am going to go ahead and close the public hearing at 8:10:30. We'll do it at 8:11, we'll round up. And with that, I'm gonna turn back to the commissioners. I believe we've done all the discussing on this, so if somebody wants to make a motion, Commissioner Anderson.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion that the planning commission recommend to the city council approval of the preliminary and final plat of Diffley 13, subject to the following conditions. All of them.
Are there 13? It looks like 9. There's, okay.
16.
16. Okay, I got a motion by Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Wad.
I will second the motion.
Okay, a motion was made by Commissioner Anderson, seconded by Commissioner Wad. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And it is, again, unanimous.
Sure, just to note, I'm abstaining because of one of the recommendations, potential conflict of interest with my employment, so I'm going to abstain.
That
from
is
this
fair. Commissioner Timmerman does work for the state of Minnesota in the Transportation Department. And, yeah, Minnesota Highway 13 is right there.
Say, well,
Been advised that anything related to MnDOT, I shall abstain.
Well, that is 4-0 to 1. It will still end up on the consent agenda. Yeah, another tie. And with that, it ends us to item number 5, or is it 6? I think it doesn't matter. Updates, one quick update. We did have a couple of people apply to be on our planning commission going forward. As you know, some terms end here on July 1st. Thank you for coming in. And Commissioner Awad and Commissioner Wallace have both been approved and brought back on to the commission to another 3 years. Congratulations. Commissioner Wallace will be our utility infielder. He'll come in, fill in when somebody's out. And so congratulations on that. Any other updates, commissioners, that you have? Seeing none, I'm gonna turn to staff. Staff, updates.
no updates?
Our next meeting,
Next meeting will be on the 26th, June 26th.
June 26th.
Yep.
Great. With that, I'm gonna hand the meeting over to Commissioner Wallace.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A motion's been made to adjourn. Do I have a second? Commissioner Timmerman?
Second.
Okay, I didn't know if you were gonna abstain, we didn't know. All right, so, motion made by Commissioner Wallace, second by Commissioner Timmerman. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It was a unanimous night. Thank you for joining us, have a great night.